Immeasurably exalted art thou, O Lord. Protect us from what lieth in front of us and behind us, above our heads, on our right, on our left, below our feet and every other side to which we are exposed. Verily, thy protection over all things is unfailing. The Bab.
How apt to have a powerful prayer from His Holiness the Bab. Thank you very much for that, Ms. Mariam Khorasani. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another exciting, thrilling, enticing episode of The Dawnbreakers. That's right, our journey continues. And as per usual, I'll be doing a quick recap as to where we were in our last session. So last session, at the tail end, we basically discovered that this area of Nur and Mazindaran in its entirety, this province was a province that was outstanding. These were the first people who really took on the faith, where Baha'u'llah was there and he was sharing with them the message, and they really embraced it and took it, and they were the first to set fire to everything. We also know this province is known as the Jazirah Khazra, which is talked about in the traditions and in the Quran. So it's a really important area. We then went on to hear about Baha'u'llah's father, who has this dream about Baha'u'llah swimming in a limitless ocean. His hairs are all out, and there are fish that come and cling onto each one of his hairs. Baha'u'llah asks the soothsayer to come and explain the dream. He explains that these fish are all the troubles and the toils of the earth, and says they will come around and surround Baha'u'llah, but they will be powerless to harm Baha'u'llah. We then learn about the Prime Minister, Haji Mirza Agassi, who was someone who was very much in love with Baha'u'llah, seemingly. He was very good friends with Baha'u'llah, he respected Baha'u'llah a lot. Even when Baha'u'llah's father died, the respect that the Prime Minister gave to Baha'u'llah, now bear in mind, Baha'u'llah's father was in the court of the Shah, there were connections that they had there, he absolutely had a loving eye for Baha'u'llah, until something happens. But this love that he has for Baha'u'llah was something that caused a lot of problems for someone who's going to be the Prime Minister. After Mirza Taqi Khan, we have someone by the name of Mirza Agha Khan Nuri, and he's going to be the Prime Minister. And he gets very jealous, actually, of the love that Haji Mirza Agassi is showing to Baha'u'llah. Now, what's the problem? Where do Haji Mirza Agassi and Baha'u'llah fall out? Essentially, the issue comes when Haji Mirza Agassi, he's traveling through and he sees this nice land with rivers, and it's this area called Kuch Hizar. And he wants to buy this. And he says to Baha'u'llah, can you please just secure this area for me? Baha'u'llah says, well, look, there's lots of people living there. We need to get their consent if they're willing to sell. Haji Mirza Agassi says, no, just do it. Baha'u'llah says, well, this isn't fair. Then fraudulently, Haji Mirza Agassi Nuri buys the land. Baha'u'llah is not happy with it. It's not just. He then speaks to the sister of the Shah and sells the property to her. A big argument ensues. Haji Mirza Agassi is then talking to the Shah. The sister is talking to the Shah. And the sister says, look, you've always told me that I should sell my jewelry and the rest of it and buy property. This is what I've done. Eventually, the Shah sides with his sister. This causes a huge problem with Haji Mirza Agassi and Baha'u'llah. For Baha'u'llah didn't really care. It wasn't an issue for him, but Haji Mirza Agassi was very much against Baha'u'llah. One time he sees Baha'u'llah's having this big banquet, feeding lots of people, and he says to Baha'u'llah, look at you feeding all these people, are you so vain? And Baha'u'llah says, I'm offering people food, and this is what you have a problem with? So we know from this point he had an issue with Baha'u'llah, unfortunately. And as I said, the person who's going to be the Prime Minister in the future, Mirza Agha Khan Nuri, also will have a problem with Baha'u'llah. We then move on to our next chapter, which deals with Mullah Hussein's journey to Khorasan. Khorasan, as we know, is this province over here. Now, before the Bab sent the letters of the living off, he said that he needed 361 people to believe him. Remember, we had this word Vahed, whose value is 19. The first Vahed, the first 19, were the Bab and the letters of the living. The Bab said then we needed another 18 Vaheds, another 18 sets of people that would believe in him until he would go on pilgrimage. So in total, there was 19 sets, the Bab and the letters of the living, plus these 18, which makes 19. 19 times 19 is 361, which represents the word kula shay, meaning all things. So this is something symbolic that the Bab said had to take place. Mullah Hussein was given specific instructions to go from Shiraz to Isfahan to Kashan to Qom to Tehran, and then go to Khorasan before going across to Najaf. Now, the capital of Khorasan is Mashhad. So we know while he was in Khorasan there's a few people that declared and found the faith. The first one, the highest ecclesiastical scholar of the entire region of Khorasan, was someone named Mirza Ahmad Azghandi. And he was a remarkable character, and he embraced the faith. The second person was Mullah Ahmad Mualem, who used to look after the children of Sayyid Kazim in Karbala. So he's now in Kasham. He now takes it on and believes. The third one is Mullah Mirza Muhammad Furugi, whose knowledge apparently was second only to that of Mirza Ahmad. The fourth person was Mullah Sheikh Ali, who the Bab then surnamed Azim. The fifth person now, he is Mirza Muhammad Baghir Gayani. He was a remarkable character. He made sure that Mullah Hussein met a lot of the clergy, kind of lots of firesides, if you like, that would take place. We know that eventually he went to join the Battle of Fort Sheikh Tabarsi. In the Battle of Fort Sheikh Tabarsi, when Mullah Hussein passes away, Qaddus makes him the leader of the fort. He ends up being martyred. The house that's in Mashhad, which still stands today, as far as I'm aware, is called the Khune Babiyya, the Babiyya house. And it was said that anyone who would go into this house would completely and utterly, definitely would be a Babi. This was how important it was. Now, Mullah Hussein, he sends his letter down to the Bab. He sends it via Yazd, because the Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, the Bab's uncle, is in Yazd, and he was dealing with all the correspondence. And then it goes down to the Bab and Qaddus. Now, when they receive this letter, according to the Dawnbreakers, this is a night that rivals the Laylatul Qadr. And the Laylatul Qadr in Islam is a day in Muharram, which is this incredibly important day, where it's said that this day is more important than 1,000 months, which, as I've mentioned before, doesn't really make sense, because 1,000 months would have the day Laylatul Qadr inside it. So it's kind of this ongoing thing, but it's a remarkable day that they talk about. And this is what apparently says it rivals even that day. That's important. So they get this letter, and they start seeing who's become Babis and the rest of it. And all of a sudden, the Bab looks at Qaddus and he says, how marvelous is it what happens between the months of Jamadi and Rajab? The months of Jamadi and Rajab. So there may be like these months apart. And he's talking about this, and Qaddus suddenly gets excited, and they start singing and dancing, and they're so in love with what's happened at this. Now, of course, there's someone by the name of Mirza Ahmad who's swanning around, who's hearing this, and he's like, well, what happened? What happened? But he doesn't dare interrupt them, trying to find out. It's only a long time later when he meets Mullah Hussein. He says to Mullah Hussein, I've been wondering for ages, what's happened between the months of Jamadi and Rajab? And Mullah Hussein says, Jamadi and Rajab? Oh! And Mirza Ahmad said, yes. And he says, yeah, I can't tell you. And he's like, what do you mean you can't tell me? We know that between the months of Jamadi and Rajab, and this is from a tradition from the Bihar, this book of traditions that come from initially the 6th Imam and the 5th Imam of Shia Islam. So the 6th Imam, Ja'far Sadiq, and his father, Baghir. These traditions come from there, and they're all a lot to do with the prophecies of the Qa'im. This quote is there, and it's never been understood, actually, what this line means. It doesn't really make any sense. Apart from now, through this context, through this lens, we learn that actually this is referring to the acceptance of Baha'u'llah. When Mullah Hussein went up to Tehran, and then he sees Mullah Mualem, gives him a scroll, who gives it to Baha'u'llah, Baha'u'llah accepts. Such a beautiful thing. Chapter 7, which is the chapter that we are currently on, deals with the Bab's pilgrimage to Hijaz, to Mecca and Medina, which he goes via ship. Now, we have an account of this by someone called Haji Abu Hassan, and he describes how the seas were rough. He describes that constantly people were arguing, they were at each other's heads. But the Bab and Qaddus could constantly be seen revealing and talking to each other in these prayers and everything so serenely. We know that the Bab talks about that any deed done on water is worth twice that done on land. Now, this is in the footnotes, and it's making reference to the fact that in hardships, in hard conditions, when you do something nice, it's so much harder to do something nice. And the Bab makes this little comment. They arrive in pilgrimage, they get to Jeddah, and as they get to Jeddah, they find a camel, the Bab's on the camel, and Qaddus is walking by foot in front of them. Out of his respect, he's walking on foot. Then they sit down by a well. All of a sudden, whilst they're enraptured in prayer, this Bedouin thief comes along, runs, grabs the saddlebag, and starts to run. The Ethiopian servant immediately springs to his feet, and he wants to go after the servant. The Bab tells him, stay. And the Ethiopian servant is so confused. He's like, why? I can catch this guy. The Bab explains that, don't worry. These writings, which are in this saddlebag, will end up going to places that we will never reach. Such a beautiful outlook, a beautiful way of seeing this. Then we know that the conditions were so hot that the Bab was the only one really who wore his turban and his cloak. A lot of people started wearing other things and they sat down, but the Bab maintained his respect. So however hot it is, if we're in Haifa, don't turn up in your swimming trunks. If the Bab can do it, so can we. On the last day of pilgrimage, the Bab meets Mirza Mohit. Mirza Mohit's the tall, lean, thin guy, and the Bab says to Mirza Mohit, do you believe in me? Either accept or deny. Mirza Mohit says, of course, I'd love to believe in you. I've got a couple of questions and I'm going to Medina tomorrow. The Bab says, no problem. I will answer and send the questions to Medina. Mirza Mohit says, I will definitely stay. The Bab says, if you happen to not stay, knowing full well that he wouldn't, I'll send them to Karbala. Lo and behold, Mirza Mohit goes from Medina all the way up to Karbala. And when he goes to Karbala, the letter is sent by the Bab. He wasn't affected by this letter in any way, shape or form. Mirza Mohit actually would sometimes support Haji Mirza Karim Khan, one of the antichrists of the Babi revelation. Sometimes he would claim to be the leader of the Shaikh school, who's making all sorts of claims. Whilst in Karbala, he then travels and goes to Baghdad, where he sends this letter to Baha'u'llah, saying to Baha'u'llah, look, let's meet in private, and maybe I'll believe. Baha'u'llah says, when I was in the mountains of Soleimaniye, I revealed this ode, and in the ode, he says something to the effect of, let him only come to me if he's willing to sacrifice. If you're not willing to give your life up, don't even bother. So if you want, come and meet me publicly. He receives this letter and immediately goes straight back to Karbala. We know when he gets to Karbala, 3 days later, he passes away. That brings us up to date with where we were. Now we're going to carry on, and it's this story, remember, we're in Mecca and Medina. We're there. The Bab is there. He's on his pilgrimage, fulfilling a prophecy as well.
No sooner had the Bab performed the last of the observances in connection with his pilgrimage to Mecca than he addressed an epistle to the Sharif of that holy city, wherein he set forth in clear and unmistakable terms the distinguishing features of his mission and called upon him to arise and embrace his cause. This epistle, together with selections from his other writings, he delivered to Qudus and instructed him to present them to the Sharif. The latter, however, too absorbed in his own material pursuits to incline his ear to the words which had been addressed to him by the Bab, failed to respond to the call of the divine message. Haji Niazi Baghdadi has been heard to relate the following. In the year 1267 AH, I undertook a pilgrimage to that holy city, where I was privileged to meet the Sharif. In the course of his conversation with me, he said, I recollect that in the year 60, during the season of pilgrimage, a youth came to visit me. He presented to me a sealed book, which I readily accepted, but was too much occupied at that time to read. A few days later, I met again that same youth, who asked me whether I had any reply to make to his offer. Pressure of work had again detained me from considering the contents of that book. I was therefore unable to give him a satisfactory reply. When the season of pilgrimage was over, one day, as I was sorting out my letters, my eyes fell accidentally upon that book. I opened it and found, in its introductory pages, a moving and exquisitely written homily, which was followed by verses the tone and language of which bore a striking resemblance to the Quran. All that I gathered from the perusal of the book was that among the people of Persia, a man of the seed of Fatima and descendant of the family of Hashim had raised a new call and was announcing to all people the appearance of the promised Qayyam. I remained, however, ignorant of the name of the author of that book, nor was I informed of the circumstances attending that call. A great commotion, I remarked, has indeed seized that land during the last few years. A youth, a descendant of the Prophet, and a merchant by profession, has claimed that his utterance was the voice of divine inspiration. He has publicly asserted that, within the space of a few days, there could stream from his tongue verses of such number and excellence as would surpass in volume and beauty the Quran itself, a work which took Muhammad no less than 23 years to reveal. A multitude of people, both high and low, civil and ecclesiastical, among the inhabitants of Persia, have rallied around his standard and have willingly sacrificed themselves in his path. That youth has, during the past year, in the last days of the month of Shaban, suffered martyrdom in Tabriz, in the province of Azerbaijan. They who persecuted him sought by this means to extinguish the light which he kindled in that land. Since his martyrdom, however, his influence has pervaded all classes of people. The Sharif, who was listening attentively, expressed his indignation at the behavior of those who had persecuted the Bab. The malediction of God be upon these evil people, he exclaimed, a people who, in days past, treated in the same manner our holy and illustrious ancestors. With these words, the Sharif concluded his conversation with me. From Mecca, the Bab proceeded to Medina. It was the first day of the month of Muharram in the year 1261 AH, when he found himself on the way to that holy city. As he approached it, he called to mind the stirring events that had immortalized the name of him who had lived and died within its walls. Those scenes which bore eloquent testimony to the creative power of that immortal genius seemed to be reenacted with undiminished splendor before his eyes. He prayed as he drew nigh unto that holy sepulchre which enshrined the mortal remains of the prophet of God. He also remembered, as he trod that holy ground, that shining herald of his own dispensation. He knew that in the cemetery of Baha'i, in a place not far distant from the shrine of Muhammad, there had been laid to rest Sheikh Ahmad As-Sa'i, the harbinger of his own revelation, who, after a life of onerous service, had decided to spend the evening of his days within the precincts of that hallowed shrine. There came to him also the vision of those holy men, those pioneers and martyrs of the faith, who had fallen gloriously on the field of battle, and who, with their lifeblood, had sealed the triumph of the cause of God. Their sacred dust seemed as if reanimated by the gentle tread of his feet. Their shades seemed to have been stirred by the reviving breath of his presence. They looked to him as if they had risen at his approach, were hastening towards him, and were voicing their welcome. They seemed to be addressing to him this fervent plea. Repair not unto thy native land, we beseech thee, O thou beloved of our hearts. Abide thou in our midst, for here, far from the tumult of thine enemies who are lying in wait for thee, thou shalt be safe and secure. We are fearful for thee. We dread the plottings and machinations of thy foes. We tremble at the thought that their deeds might bring eternal damnation to their souls. Fear not, the Bab's indomitable spirit replied. I am come into this world to bear witness to the glory of sacrifice. You are aware of the intensity of my longing. You realize the degree of my renunciation. Nay, beseech the Lord your God to hasten the hour of my martyrdom and to accept my sacrifice. Rejoice, for both I and Qadus will be slain on the altar of our devotion to the King of glory. The blood which we are destined to shed in his path will water and revive the garden of our immortal felicity. The drops of this consecrated blood will be the seed out of which will arise the mighty tree of God, the tree that will gather beneath its all-embracing shadow the peoples and kindreds of the earth. Grieve not, therefore, if I depart from this land, for I am hastening to fulfill my destiny.
Once the Bab is there, he gives the Qudus a tablet and he says, go and give this to the Sharif of Mecca. Go and give this to him. And then we hear this story from Haji Niyaz al-Baghdadi, who says that when he goes on pilgrimage 7 years later, he then speaks to the Sharif and he's talking to the Sharif, and the Sharif says, yes, I remember 7 years ago, actually. I was given this book, but I didn't really at the time get to read it. And Niyaz al-Baghdadi is like, what? Why wouldn't you read it? You need to look into this. And he starts explaining that His Holiness the Bab had come and he'd revealed all these things and he's claiming to be the promised Qayyam. And he's like, you're the Sharif. This is something you should have read. Why didn't you do that? He says, okay. And then he goes on to explain that the Bab had said that within a few days he could reveal verses that could equal the volume of that of the Quran that took 23 years for Prophet Muhammad to write. Now, this isn't a dig at Prophet Muhammad, that Prophet Muhammad couldn't have written it quicker at all. But the point is that the revelation is coming so thick and fast, and the time for more information has really stepped up. So the Sharif then finds out that the Bab has been martyred. He also finds out that the Bab was the seed of Fatima and a descendant of the Hashim, of the Bani Hashim, which is what prophesies that the Qayyam will be. The Sharif is very much upset. The Bab then travels from Mecca to Medina. He makes his journey from Mecca to Medina. He comes up to here. And then while he's there, he's in the cemetery of Baha'i. Now, the cemetery of Baha'i, we mentioned before, Sheikh Ahmad, who kicks our entire story off, the harbinger of the revelation of the Bab, essentially. He is buried in the cemetery of Baha'i. And we have this remarkable, remarkable vision where the Bab sees people, all the heroic souls of old, the sacred dust reanimate, so it sort of comes out the ground, and this is a vision the Babs have, and they're coming around the Bab and they're praising the Bab and they're begging him, they're saying, repair not unto thy native land. They're saying to the Bab, you don't know what's going to happen to you, stay here, stay safe, please, we beg you, don't go back, you're going to have punishment. The Bab says, of course. The Bible says, I have come to sacrifice. This is what I'm coming to do. I'm coming to sacrifice, to teach this message. I know what's going to happen to me. I know what's going to happen to Godus as well. But fear not. This is the purpose. This is what we're here to do. So it's this beautiful animated story, that this vision that takes place of these souls of old that come reinforced, come back to life, and then the bard's indomitable spirit speaks back to them and is fully aware of what's going to happen.
I just find it very, very interesting, this running theme about sacrifice. And when here the Bab says, both I and Rodus will be slain, I was remembered of those of a tradition we had read earlier in chapter 3, that says that Rodus was embodying this tradition of Islam, which says, whoso seeketh me shall find me, whoso findeth me shall be drawn towards me, whoso draweth nigh unto me shall love me, whoso loveth me, him shall I also love. He who is beloved of me, him shall I slay. He who is slain by me, I myself shall be his ransom. And it's interesting to see that this not only applies to the letters of the living and all the followers of the Bab, but applies to the Bab himself, essentially. And for me, because here it says, will be slain on the altar for devotion to the King of Glory, so to Baha'u'llah, I believe. And in a way, I would say like this sacrifice is really one of the defining themes of the dispensation of the Bab, and how interesting that it applies to the Bab himself, which in a way tells us a little bit about his station compared to that of Baha'u'llah.
In this book of Nabil, for example, this section on the meditations of the Bab in Medina, who has recorded this? I want to know where this comes from.
One of the things that occurs often in the writings of the Bab and in Sheikh Ahmad and of course in Baha'u'llah is something called in Arabic Lisan-e Hal. Lisan-e Hal. Lisan-e Hal means the voice of circumstance, the language of the reality around you. Now, the language of the reality around you requires a particular acoustic apparatus, a particular hearing apparatus. So the Dawnbreakers is written by this totally enamored individual called Nabil. So he says the Bab was visiting the cemetery of Baha'i, the cemetery of the Prophet. And it appeared as if. Now, what is this as if? As if the language of those souls was rising from their graves as saying, oh, blessed Bab, don't go back to Persia. Nobody was there to recount this. The Bab himself, as far as my limited, humble human knowledge is there, nobody else was able to record it. But the Dawnbreakers, the beloved Shoghi Effendi, and Nabil, of course, the two of them speaking the same language, they are so enamored of the reality of the Bab. Therefore, they're articulating what the voice of that cemetery was saying. Now, if I just stretch your imagination, dearest Dave, that when Baha'u'llah arrives in the Holy Land in 1868 as a prisoner, you know what Baha'u'llah reveals? He says, when I arrived, I could see all the prophets, all from Abraham forwards. They're all coming to the coast of Haifa and Akka, where he landed, welcoming me with banners of light. Now, nobody was there to witness the banners of light. Nobody was there to witness Isaiah and Jeremiah and all the prophetic figures of the past welcoming the prisoner of Akka. But it appears as if, dearest Dave, they're speaking. And this thing goes on all the time in the Baha'i writings. Baha'u'llah says in the Hidden Words, when you walk on the earth is telling you, why are you treading on me? Zameen man as to bizarast. My earth is a bit tired of you. And nobody can hear the earth in Leicester saying, I'm tired of you, Khazi, or I'm tired of you, Dave, in Reading. They are not tired, of course, they love you. But what I'm saying is that it appears as if, God forbid, if I don't listen to the revelation, the earth is tired of me. Now, in the area of Medina and Mecca, the earth was resonating with the response to the Bab's visit. This is called Lisan Hal. Baha'i history, Baha'i accounts are written with the language of Lisan Hal. And this is what Baha'u'llah uses. The language infused into reality by the Holy Spirit, but only they can hear it. And only Nabil is echoing it. The Dawnbreaker says it appears as if.
Just sorry to extend a bit, Dave. Very, very quick question. I was interested by the story of the Sharif of Mecca. Seems to me a bit like a missed opportunity. I mean, if he had taken the trouble to actually read at the time what the Bab had revealed to him, he might have become a supporter of the cause, actually, it seems to me. Just a very quick one. What is the role of a Sharif? That's not very clear to me. What does the Sharif of Mecca actually do?
The Ottoman Empire conquered all the territories of those areas from the middle of the 18th century. So all the sultans in Constantinople, they had the authority over Palestine, over Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, all these countries, including those two sacred shrines in Mecca and Medina. But they appointed an individual, respected very much. He's called Sharif al-Haramain. So he himself has some sort of ancestry through the Prophet, but he's supposed like a guardian over it. And that is the role. On behalf of the Khalifa of Islam in Constantinople, he's got the role of looking after those areas. Sharif means a noble person that can look after these places.
Thank you very much. And hopefully, Nick, that answers your question there.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Chapter 8, the Bab's stay in Shiraz after the pilgrimage. The visit of the Bab to Medina marked the concluding stage of his pilgrimage to Hijaz. From thence he returned to Jeddah, and by way of the sea regained his native land. He landed at Bushir 9 lunar months after he had embarked on his pilgrimage from that port. In the same khan which he had previously occupied, he received his friends and relatives who had come to greet and welcome him. While still in Bushir, he summoned Qadus to his presence, and with the utmost kindness bade him depart for Shiraz. The days of your companionship with me, he told him, are drawing to a close. The hour of separation has struck, a separation which no reunion will follow except in the kingdom of God, in the presence of the King of Glory. In this world of dust, no more than 9 fleeting months of association with me have been allotted to you. On the shores of the great beyond, however, in the realm of immortality, joy of eternal reunion awaits us. The hand of destiny will ere long plunge you into an ocean of tribulation for his sake. I too will follow you. I too will be immersed beneath its depths. Rejoice with exceeding gladness, for you have been chosen as the standard bearer of the host of affliction, and are standing in the vanguard of the noble army that will suffer martyrdom in his name. In the streets of Shiraz, indignities will be heaped upon you, and the severest injuries will afflict your body. You will survive the ignominious behavior of your foes, and will attain the presence of him who is the one object of our adoration and love. In his presence, you will forget all the harm and disgrace that shall have befallen you. The hosts of the unseen will hasten forth to assist you, and will proclaim to all the world your heroism and glory. Yours will be the ineffable joy of quaffing the cup of martyrdom for his sake. I too shall tread the path of sacrifice, and will join you in the realm of eternity. The Bab then delivered into his hands a letter he had written to Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, his maternal uncle, in which he had informed him of his safe return to Bushir. He also entrusted him with a copy of Khasayal Sabir, a treatise in which he had set forth the essential requirements from those who had attained to the knowledge of the new revelation and had recognized its claim. As he bade Qadus his last farewell, he asked him to convey his greetings to each of his loved ones in Shiraz. Qadus, with feelings of unshakable determination to carry out the expressed wishes of his master, set out from Bushir. Arriving at Shiraz, he was affectionately welcomed by Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, who received him in his own home and eagerly inquired after the health and doings of his beloved kinsman. Finding him receptive to the call of the new message, Qadus acquainted him with the nature of the revelation with which that youth had already fired his soul. The Bab's maternal uncle, as a result of the endeavors exerted by Qadus, was the first, after the letters of the living, to embrace the cause in Shiraz. As the full significance of the newborn faith had remained as yet undivulged, he was aware of the full extent of its implications and glory. His conversation with Qaddus, however, removed the veil from his eyes. So steadfast became his faith and so profound grew his love for the Bab that he consecrated his whole life to his service. With unrelaxing vigilance, he arose to defend his cause and to shield his person. In his sustained endeavors, he scorned fatigue and was disdainful of death. Though recognized as an outstanding figure among the businessmen of that city, he never allowed material considerations to interfere with his spiritual responsibility of safeguarding the person and advancing the cause of his beloved kinsman. He persevered in this task until the hour when, joining the company of the 7 martyrs of Tehran, he, in circumstances of exceptional heroism, laid down his life for him. The next person whom Qaddus met in Shiraz was Ismullah al-Astaq, Mullah Sadiq Khorasani, to whom he entrusted the copy of the Qasail Sabeh and stressed the necessity of putting into effect immediately all its provisions. Among its precepts was the emphatic injunction of the Bab to every loyal believer to add the following words to the traditional formula of the Azan. I bear witness that he, whose name is the Ali Qabl Muhammad, is the servant of the Baqiyatullah. Mullah Sadegh, who in those days had been extolling from the pulpit top to large audiences the virtues of the Imams of the faith, was so enraptured by the theme and language of that treatise that he unhesitatingly resolved to carry out all the observances it ordained. Driven by the impelling force inherent in that tablet, he, one day as he was leading his congregation in prayer in the Masjid-e-Naw, suddenly proclaimed, as he was sounding the azan, the additional words prescribed by the Bab. The multitude that heard him was astounded by his cry. Dismay and consternation seized the entire congregation. The distinguished divines who occupied the front seats and who were greatly revered for their pious orthodoxy raised a clamor, loudly protesting, "Woe betide us, the guardians and protectors of the faith of God! Behold, this man has hoisted the standard of heresy. Down with this infamous traitor. He has spoken blasphemy. Arrest him, for he is a disgrace to our faith." Who, they angrily exclaimed, dare authorize such grave departure from the established precepts of Islam? Who has presumed to arrogate to himself this supreme prerogative? The populace re-echoed the protestations of these divines and arose to reinforce their clamor. The whole city had been aroused and public order was, as a result, seriously threatened. The governor of the province of Fars, Hussein Khani Iravani, surnamed Judan Bashi, and generally designated in those days as Sahib-e-Ikhtiyar, found it necessary to intervene and to inquire into the cause of this sudden commotion. He was informed that a disciple of a young man named Sayyid Bab, who had just returned from his pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina and was now living in Bushir, had arrived in Shiraz and was propagating the teachings of his master. This disciple, Hussein Khan was further informed, claims that his teacher is the author of a new revelation and is the revealer of a book which he asserts is divinely inspired. Mullah Sadegh Khorasani has embraced that faith and is fearlessly summoning the multitude to the acceptance of that message. He declares its recognition to be the first obligation of every loyal and pious follower of Shia Islam. Hussein Khan ordered the arrest of both Qaddus and Mullah Sadegh. The police authorities to whom they were delivered were instructed to bring them handcuffed into the presence of the governor. The police also delivered into the hands of Hussein Khan the copy of the Qaimul Asma, which they had seized from Mullah Sadegh while he was reading aloud its passages to an excited congregation. Qaddus, owing to his youthful appearance and unconventional dress, was at first ignored by Hussein Khan, who preferred to direct his remarks to his more dignified and elderly companion. "Tell me," angrily asked the governor, as he turned to Mullah Sadegh, "if you are aware of the opening passage of the Qaimul Asma, wherein the Sayyid Bab addresses the rulers and kings of the earth in these terms, 'Divest yourselves of the robe of sovereignty, for he who is the king in truth hath been made manifest. The kingdom is God's, the most exalted. Thus hath the pen of the Most High decreed. If this be true, it must necessarily apply to my sovereign, Muhammad Shah of the Qajar dynasty, whom I represent as the chief magistrate of this province. Must Muhammad Shah, according to this behest, lay down his crown and abandon his sovereignty? Must I too abdicate my power and relinquish my position?" Mullah Sadegh unhesitatingly replied, "When once the truth of the revelation announced by the author of these words shall have been definitely established, the truth of whatsoever has fallen from his lips will likewise be vindicated. If these words be the word of God, the abdication of Muhammad Shah and his like can matter but little. It can in no wise turn aside the divine purpose, nor alter the sovereignty of the Almighty and Eternal King."
They return back from their pilgrimage. They come to Bandar Bushir. Bandar meaning port, so they're in Bandar Bushir. Whilst they're there, the Bab has a conversation with Qaddus, and he says, "You have spent 9 months with me. our time together has now ceased. That's it. We're not going to spend any more time together. He says, you will go on to meet the King of Glory. You will go on to meet Baha'u'llah. In Shiraz, you will be beaten. This is going to happen. But you will survive that, and you will go on, and you will then be martyred. This is what he lays down to Qudus very clearly. He then gives Qudus this mission, and he says, Qudus, I need you to go from here to Shiraz. And when you go to Shiraz, I need you to share the message with my uncle, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali. This is the maternal uncle of the Bab who basically brought the Bab up, who was like a father to the Bab. He says, I want you to go and teach my uncle, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali. He says, also, I want you to go to Esmallah Azdag, Mullah Sadegh, and I want you to go and teach him as well. So he goes and teaches Mullah Sadegh. He goes and teaches the Bab's uncle. The Bab's uncle is the first one outside the letters of the living to believe and accept the faith. Mullah Sadegh is the next person who's a slightly older person. He has his masjid that he goes to, his mosque, and in the masjid he goes up and he's in his pulpit and he starts doing the azan, the call to prayer. And there's a very specific set of words that you would say as a Muslim, and the Shias have a little extra add-on bit saying, verily, the Imam Ali is the commander of the faithful, and they have this little add-on that they do, the Shias compared to the Sunnis. But all of a sudden, Mullah Sadegh adds something else. Mullah Sadegh decides to add, verily, the Ali Qabla Muhammad, verily is the servant of the Baghiyatullah. Now, the Baghiyatullah is a term that's known in Islam, and they believe actually the Baghiyatullah, Baghiyah in Farsi means like the rest, and the Baghiyatullah means remnant of God, so whatever's left over of God. So I think the Sunni understanding is one more of that you will get some grace, whatever's left over from God. The Shias sort of see it more differently as actually the 12th Imam is the Baghiyatullah. So there's a slight different interpretation as to what this means. But he's now saying that Ali Qabla Muhammad. So Ali is a name, Muhammad is a name, and Qabl means before. So what he's saying essentially, the Ali that comes before Muhammad, okay, like Sayyid Ali Muhammad in the name, the Bab's name, Sayyid Ali Muhammad, Ali comes before Muhammad, is the servant of the Baghiyatullah. So all of a sudden there's this claim that's being made that Ali Muhammad is the servant of the Baghiyatullah. What's going on? What's this claim that's being made? People are furious. This is tantamount to blasphemy. They go absolutely crazy and they want to start grabbing him and tearing him down and start beating him. Mullah Sadegh is taken alongside Qudus. Mullah Sadegh and Qudus, they're taken to see the governor of Shiraz, someone by the name of Hussein Khan, who we know to be an alcoholic pretty much, and someone who would womanize quite a lot. As they arrive there, he has a copy of the Qayyum al-Asma. As part of this Qayyum al-Asma, which is this commentary on the Surah of Yusuf, Surah of Joseph, that was revealed, the first chapter, the Surah of Mulk of the Qayyum al-Asma, was revealed to Mullah Hussein. He takes this and he's got some of the writings, and in this, Hussein Khan reads that, wait, here it says the sovereign should divest their power. And he says to Mullah Sadegh, talks more to Mullah Sadegh because he's older, his beard is bigger, obviously he's more spiritual, ignoring God just a little bit. He says, well, what should happen? Should Muhammad Shah give up his power? Should I give up my power? And he's very annoyed.
That cruel and impious ruler was sorely displeased with such an answer. He reviled and cursed him, ordered his attendants to strip him of his garments and to scourge him with 1,000 lashes. He then commanded that the beards of both Qudus and Mullah Sadegh should be burned, their noses be pierced, that through this incision a cord should be passed, and with this halter they should be led through the streets of the city. It will be an object lesson to the people of Shiraz, Hussein Khan declared. Who will know what the penalty of heresy will be? Mullah Sadegh, calm and self-possessed, and with eyes upraised to heaven, was heard reciting this prayer. O Lord our God, we have indeed heard the voice of one that called. He called us to the faith. Believe ye on the Lord your God, and we have believed. O God, our God, forgive us then our sins and hide away from us our evil deeds, and cause us to die with magnificent fortitude, both resign themselves to their fate. Those who had been instructed to inflict this savage punishment performed their task with alacrity and vigor. None intervened in behalf of these sufferers. None was inclined to plead their cause. Soon after this, They were both expelled from Shiraz. Before their expulsion, they were warned that if they ever attempted to return to this city, they would both be crucified. By their sufferings, they earned the immortal distinction of having been the first to be persecuted on Persian soil for the sake of their faith. Mullah Ali Bastami, though the first to fall a victim to the relentless hate of the enemy, underwent his persecution in Iraq, which lay beyond the confines of Persia. Nor did his sufferings, intense as they were, compare with the hideous and barbaric cruelty which characterized the torture inflicted upon Qudus and Mullah Sadiq.
An eyewitness of this revolting episode, an unbeliever residing in Shiraz, related to me the following. I was present when Mullah Sadiq was being scourged. I watched his persecutors each in turn apply the lash to his bleeding shoulders and continue the strokes until he became exhausted. No one believed that Mullah Sadiq, so advanced in age and so frail in body, could possibly survive 50 such savage strokes. We marveled at his fortitude when we found that although the number of the strokes of the scourge he had received had already exceeded 900, his face still retained its original serenity and calm. A smile was upon his face as he held his hands before his mouth. He seemed utterly indifferent to the blows that were being showered upon him. When he was being expelled from the city, I succeeded in approaching him and asked him why he had held his hand before his mouth. I expressed surprise at the smile upon his countenance. He emphatically replied, "The first 7 strokes were severely painful. To the rest, I seemed to have grown indifferent. I was wondering whether the strokes that followed were actually being applied to my own body. A feeling of joyous exultation had invaded my soul. I was trying to repress my feelings and to restrain my laughter. I can now realize how the Almighty Deliverer is able in the twinkling of an eye to turn pain into ease and sorrow into gladness. Immensely exalted is his power above and beyond the idle fancy of his mortal creatures." Mullah Sadiq, whom I met years after, confirmed every detail of this moving episode. Hussein Khan's anger was not appeased by this atrocious and most undeserved chastisement. His wanton and capricious cruelty found further vent in the assault, which he now directed against the person of the Bab. He dispatched to Bushehr a mounted escort of his own trusted guard, with emphatic instructions to arrest the Bab and to bring him in chains to Shiraz. The leader of that escort, a member of the Nusayri community, better known as the sect of Aliullahi, related the following. Having completed the 3rd stage of our journey to Bushehr, we encountered in the midst of the wilderness a youth who wore a green sash and a small turban, after the manner of the Sayyids who are in the trading profession. He was on horseback and was followed by an Ethiopian servant who was in charge of his belongings. As we approached him, he saluted us and inquired as to our destination. I thought it best to conceal from him the truth, and replied that in this vicinity we had been commanded by the governor of Fars to conduct a certain inquiry. He smilingly observed, "The governor has sent you to arrest me. Here I am. Do with me as you please. By coming out to meet you, I have curtailed the length of your march and made it easier for you to find me." I was startled by his remarks and marveled at his candor and straightforwardness. I could not explain, however, his readiness to subject himself of his own accord to severe discipline of government officials and to risk thereby his own life and safety. I tried to ignore him, and as I was preparing to leave, when he approached me and said, "I swear by the righteousness of him who created man, distinguished him from among the rest of his creatures, and caused his heart to be made the seat of his sovereignty and knowledge, that all my life I had uttered no word but the truth, and had no other desire except the welfare and advancement of my fellow men. I have disdained my own ease and have avoided being the cause of pain or sorrow to anyone. I know that you are seeking me. I prefer to deliver myself into your hands, rather than subject you and your companions to unnecessary annoyance for my sake." These words moved me profoundly. I instinctively dismounted from my horse and, kissing his stirrups, addressed him in these words: "O light of the eyes of the prophets of God, I adjure you by him who has created you and endowed you with such loftiness and power to grant my request and to answer my prayer. I beseech you to escape from this place and to flee from the face of Hussein Khan, the ruthless and despicable governor of this province. I dread his machinations against you. I rebel at the idea of being made the instrument of his malignant designs against so innocent and noble descendant of the prophets of God. My companions are all honorable men. Their word is their bond. They will pledge themselves not to betray your flight. I pray you, betake yourself to the city of Mashhad in Khorasan and avoid falling a victim to the brutality of this remorseless wolf. To my earnest entreaty, he gave this answer. May the Lord your God requite you for your magnanimity and noble intention. No one knows the mystery of my cause. No one can fathom its secrets. Never will I turn my face away from the decree of God. He alone is my sure stronghold, my stay and my refuge. Until my last hour is at hand, none dare assail me. None can frustrate the plan of the Almighty. And when my hour is come, how great will be my joy to quaff the cup of martyrdom in his name. Here am I. Deliver me into the hands of your master. Be not afraid, for no one will blame you. I bowed my consent and carry out his desire. The Bab straightway resumed his journey to Shiraz. Free and unfettered, he went before his escort, which followed him in an attitude of respectful devotion. By the magic of his words, he had disarmed the hostility of his guards and transmuted their proud arrogance into humility and love. Reaching the city, they proceeded directly to the seat of the government. Whosoever observed the cavalcade marching through the streets could not help marvel at this most unusual spectacle. Immediately, Hussein Khan was informed of the arrival of the Bab. He summoned him to his presence. He received him with the utmost insolence and bade him occupy a seat facing him in the center of the room. He publicly rebuked him, and in abusive language denounced his conduct. Do you realize, he angrily protested, what a great mischief you have kindled? Are you aware what a disgrace you have become to the holy faith of Islam and to the august person of our sovereign? Are you not the man who claims to be the author of a new revelation which annuls the sacred precepts of the Quran? The Bab calmly replied, if any bad man come unto you with news, clear up the matter at once, lest through ignorance ye harm others, and be speedily constrained to repent what ye have done. These words inflamed the wrath of Hussein Khan. What? He exclaimed. Dare you ascribe to us the evil, ignorance, and folly? Turning to his attendant, he bade him strike the Bab in the face. So violent was the blow that the Bab's turban fell to the ground. Sheikh Abu Turab, the Imam Jummeh of Shiraz, who was present at the meeting and who strongly disapproved of the conduct of Hussein Khan, ordered that the Bab's turban be replaced upon his head and invited him to be seated by his side. Turning to the governor, the Imam Jummeh explained to him the circumstances connected with the revelation of the verse of the Quran, which the Bab had quoted, and sought by this means to calm his fury. This verse which this youth hath quoted, he told him, has made a profound impression upon me. The wise course, I feel, is to inquire into this matter with great care and to judge him according to the precepts of the Holy Book. Hussein Khan readily consented, whereupon Sheikh Abu Turab questioned the Bab regarding the nature and character of his revelation. The Bab denied the claim of being either the representative of the promised Qa'im or the intermediary between him and the faithful. We are completely satisfied, replied the Imam Jummeh. We shall request you to present yourself on Friday in the Masjid of Bakil and to proclaim publicly your denial. As Sheikh Abu Turab arose to depart in the hope of terminating the proceedings, Hussein Khan intervened and said, we shall require a person of recognized standing to give bail and surety for him, and to pledge his words in writing that ever in future this youth should attempt by word or deed to prejudice the interests either of the faith of Islam or of the government of this land, he would straightway deliver him into our hands and regard himself under all circumstances responsible for his behavior. Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, the Bab's maternal uncle who was present at that meeting, consented to act as the sponsor of his nephew. In his own handwriting, he wrote his pledge, affixed it to his seal, confirmed it by the signature of a number of witnesses, and delivered it to the governor. Whereupon Hussein Khan ordered that the Bab be entrusted to the care of his uncle, with the condition that at whatever time the governor should deem it advisable, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali would at once deliver the Bab into his hands.
After the beards of Godus and Mullah Sadegh are burnt, they're burnt off. They are then beaten. Mullah Sadegh is given 1,000 strokes. 1,000. Now, for his age, it was pretty much understood that being given 1,000 lashes, he would perish, that he wouldn't make it. It'd be impossible for someone to last. In fact, even after 50, maybe that's too much. So essentially, it's a death sentence that he's given. Now, Hussein Khan is given this to give a symbol, a message out to anybody. Don't you dare be pushing this message. Don't you proclaim this at all. There's an account that someone who comes along and they sees he's on 900 strokes. 900! But they notice that before, after 7, he covers his mouth. Mullah Sadegh covers his mouth after 7 strokes. They can't figure out why this is. Only later does Mullah Sadegh explain that after the 7th stroke, he felt no pain. And he's covering his mouth to hide the fact that he's going to burst out laughing. Can you imagine Mullah Sadegh seeing them, whipping them and trying to whip them so much, and he just doesn't feel any pain? He's like, wow, God has come and protected me. They are both beaten. They have halters, rings put through their nose, and they are dragged through the street. These are to be the first people that would have suffered on Persian soil as a result of being Babis. Now we know Mullah Ali Bastami, who we read about previously, he was beaten by the father of Abdul Wahab, a guy named Abdul Majid, but that was a beating. This was much more severe, with beads being rings through noses and a severe beating. Both of them then, Qaddus and Mullah Sadegh, are told to leave Shiraz and to head north. Mullah Sadegh then heads north. We know that certainly. Hussein Khan is not happy with this. He's like, no, let's go after the main person behind this Sayyid Bab, or whoever he is. So he sends his military to go down from Shiraz, and they're heading down towards Bandar Bashir in this direction. Now the Bab obviously knows what's going to happen. The Bab is actually going along as well. A third of the way, he sees them and says to them, where are you going? And they don't want to tell the Bab. They say, oh, we've been sent by Hussein Khan to go on some a matter of inquiry to do something. The Bab says, you're here to arrest Sayyid Ali Muhammad. Sayyid Bab, you're here to arrest me. Well, here I am. I've made myself known to you, so you don't have to go searching for me. I don't want to inconvenience you. They're blown away. They say, no. It's okay. Just go. You don't know what Hussein Khan's like. The Bab says, that's okay. If he wants me, I'll go. And they try to persuade the Bab, please run away. We'll just say we didn't find you. It's all right. We'll just say, we looked, we couldn't see him. It's done. The Bab says no. They then march back with the Bab at the front, like a king marching to Shiraz. Once he arrives in Shiraz, Hussein Ali Khan, the governor of Shiraz, is informed that he's there. He calls the Bab to come and sit opposite him. And he starts having a go at the Bab, trying to tear the Bab to pieces. The Bab responds, beware lest any bad man come with you with news, lest the ignorance that you may have may harm others. This quote from the Quran. And Hussein Khan gets furious, thinks the Bab is giving him a lip back, he's being rude back to him, and he orders that the Bab is slapped. Bang! The Bab is hit, his turban falls to the floor. The Imam Jameh, Sheikh Abu Tarab, is disgusted by what happens. He orders that the turban of the Bab be placed back onto his head. He then says to Hussein Khan, he's quoting the Quran. Hussein Khan, completely oblivious to this, what are you doing, Hussein Khan? Then it said, fine, okay. And then they say, right, we charge you with these things. You're claiming to be the representative of the Qayyam, of the intermediary. The Bab says, absolutely not. I am not the representative of the Qayyam. I am also not the intermediary. And they say, right, well, if you come to the Vakil Masjid, the Vakil Mosque, and stand up and you proclaim this, then okay, then we'll let you up. Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, the Bab's maternal uncle, is the one who then gives his seal and says, right, I will look after him, and he's essentially going to be on bail at the Bab's house, at the Bab's uncle's house.
The tragedy of what happens between Hussein Khan and his exalted Bab is this. Simply this is the same scenario of making mistakes that has been going on for 170 years. His Holiness the Bab quotes a verse from the Quran. Of course, the Dawnbreakers has translated into English, and we assume, but the verse that the Bab quotes, dearest Dave, from Surah 49, has a word in Arabic which says, إِذَا جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ. If a fasiq should come in front of you with a news, investigate it, find it out, do this, do this. Now, the only word that a Persian would understand amongst the whole verse, Dave, which one do you think it is? Fasiq. Fasiq means the bad man, the drinking wine, the corrupt person. So the governor only recognizes, Dave, one word out of the totality of the verse. And his reaction is that His Holiness the Bab has called him, the governor, that you are a fasiq. F-A-S-I-Q, that you are the evil drinker, etc., bad man. What the Bab was quoting a surah, a chapter of the Quran, saying, if any bad man comes to you, investigate the reality. Now, the Imam Jumi understood the rest of the verse in Arabic, but the governor didn't.
And of course, we know he wasn't a Farsi in any way, shape, or form. Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, as we know, by the way, is the maternal uncle of the Bab. So the Bab is in his house under house arrest. And at any point, Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali must deliver the Bab. He's on bail, essentially.
Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, his heart filled with gratitude to God, conducted the Bab to his home and committed to him the loving care of his revered mother. He rejoiced at this family reunion and was greatly relieved by the deliverance of his dear and precious kinsman from the grasp of that malignant tyrant. In the quiet of his own home, the Bab led for a time a life of undisturbed retirement. No one except his wife, his mother, and his uncles had any intercourse with him. Meanwhile, the mischief makers were busily pressing Sheikh Abu Turab to summon the Bab to the Masjid-e-Waqi to call upon him to fulfill his pledge. Sheikh Abu Turab was known to be a man of kindly disposition and of a temperament and nature which bore a striking resemblance to the character of the late Mirza Abu Qasim, the Imam Jumi of Tehran. He was extremely reluctant to treat with contumely persons of recognized standing, particularly if these were residents of Shiraz. Instinctively, he felt this to be his duty, observed it conscientiously, and was as a result universally esteemed by the people of that city. He therefore sought through evasive answers and repeated postponements to appease the indignation of the multitude. He found, however, that the stirrers up of mischief and sedition were bending every effort further to inflame the feelings of general resentment which had seized the masses. He at length felt compelled to address a confidential message to Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, requesting him to bring the Bab with him on Friday to the Masjid-e-Waqi, that he might fulfill the pledge he had given. My hope, he added, is that by the aid of God, the statements of your nephew may ease the tenseness of the situation and may lead to your tranquility as well as to our own. The Bab, accompanied by Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, arrived at the masjid at a time when the Imam Jumi had just ascended the pulpit and was preparing to deliver his sermon. As soon as his eyes fell upon the Bab, he publicly welcomed him, requested him to ascend the pulpit, and called upon him to address the congregation. The Bab, responding to his invitation, advanced towards him and, standing on the first step of the staircase, prepared to address the people. Come up higher, interjected the Imam Jumi. Complying with his wish, the Bab ascended 2 more steps. As he was standing, his head hid the breast of Sheikh Abu Turab, who was occupying the pulpit top. He began by prefacing his public declaration with an introductory discourse. No sooner had he uttered the opening words of praise be to God, who hath in truth created the heavens and the earth, than a certain Syed known as Syed Shishpari, whose function was to carry the mace before the Imam Jumi, insolently shouted, "Enough of this idle chatter. Declare now and immediately the thing you intend to say." The Imam Jumi greatly resented the rudeness of the Sayyid's remark. "Hold your peace," he rebuked him, "and be ashamed of your impertinence." He then, turning to the Bab, asked him to be brief, as this, he said, would allay the excitement of the people. The Bab, as he faced the congregation, declared, "The condemnation of God be upon him who regards me either as a representative of the Imam or the gate thereof. The condemnation of God be also upon whosoever imputes to me the charge of having denied the unity of God, of having repudiated the prophethood of Muhammad, the seal of the prophets, of having rejected the truth of any of the messengers of old, or of having refused to recognize the guardianship of Ali, the commander of the faithful, or of any of the Imams who have succeeded him." He then ascended to the top of the staircase, embraced the Imam Jumi, and descending to the floor of the masjid, joined the congregation for the observance of the Friday prayer. The Imam Jumi intervened and requested him to retire. "Your family," he said, "is anxiously awaiting your return. All are apprehensive lest any harm befall you. Repair to your house and there offer your prayer. Of greater merit shall this deed be in the sight of God." Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali also was at the request of Imam Jumi asked to accompany his nephew to his home. This precautionary measure, which Sheikh Abu Turab thought it wise to observe, was actuated by the fear lest after the dispersion of the congregation, a few of the evil-minded among the crowd might still attempt to injure the person of the Bab or endanger his life. But for the sagacity, the sympathy, and the careful attention which the Imam Jumi so strikingly displayed on a number of such occasions, the infuriated mob would doubtless have been led to gratify its savage desire and would have committed the most abominable of excesses. He seemed to have been the instrument of the invisible hand appointed to protect both the person and the mission of that youth. The Bab regained his home and for some time was able to lead, in the privacy of his house and in close association with his family and kinsmen, a life of comparative tranquility. In those days, he celebrated the advent of the first Nowruz. Since he had declared his mission, that festival fell in that year on the 10th day of the month of Rabiul Awwal, 1261 AH. A few among those who were present on that memorable occasion in the Masjid of Aqil and had listened to the statements of the Bab were greatly impressed by the masterly manner in which that youth had, by his unaided efforts, succeeded in silencing his formidable opponents. Soon after this event, they were each led to apprehend the reality of his mission and to recognize its glory. Among them was Sheikh Ali Mirza, the nephew of this same Imam Jumi, a young man who had just attained the age of maturity. The seed implanted in his heart grew and developed until in the year 1267 AH, he was privileged to meet Baha'u'llah in Iraq. That visit filled him with enthusiasm and joy. Returning greatly refreshed to his native land, he resumed with redoubled energy his labors for the cause. From that year until the present time, he has persevered in his task and has achieved distinction by the uprightness of his character and wholehearted devotion to his government and country. Recently, a letter addressed by him to Baha'u'llah has reached the Holy Land, in which he expresses his keen satisfaction at the progress of the cause in Persia. I am mute with wonder, he writes, when I behold the evidences of God's unconquerable power manifested among the people of my country. In a land which has for years so savagely persecuted the faith, a man who for 40 years has been known throughout Persia as a Babi has been made the sole arbitrator in a case of dispute which involves, on the one hand, the Zilu Sultan, the tyrannical son of the Shah and a sworn enemy of the cause, and on the other, Mirza Fath Ali Khan, the Sahib Divan. It has been publicly announced that whatsoever be the verdict of this Babi, the same should be unreservedly accepted by both parties and should be unhesitatingly enforced.
The Bab is under house arrest at the Haji Mirza Sayyid Ali, the maternal uncle of the Bab, his house. People keep calling for the Bab to come to the Masjid of Aqil and to denounce this claim. And they keep saying to Sheikh Abu Turab, they say, can you get them? And Sheikh Abu Turab, who really likes the Bab, wants to keep things just cool and not forced to do this. Eventually, he writes to the Bab and he says, look, I'm so sorry. Can you please come to the mosque and do this? Now, this is an event that's really polarized in Shiraz. A lot of people know what had happened, that these claims were made. And you have to understand there were many people crowding around the mosque. What was the Bab going to say? Was he going to go and make a statement that would blow people away? Would he be martyred? What would happen? So he goes there and he starts ascending the pulpit. And Sheikh Abu Turab, the Imam Jama, says, come up higher. And he brings him up. So roughly his head is the same height as the breast of Sheikh Abu Turab. And he's there and people are all quiet. What is he going to say? He says, firstly, I love Islam and I believe in the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I'm not coming against Islam. I am not a representative of the Qa'im. I am not an intermediary between the Qa'im. And he says, I believe in all the Imams, and I believe especially in Imam Ali as well. I believe in the Prophet. And he gives this, and he starts going into his love. And then somebody by the name of Shish Pari turns around and says, enough of this. Like stop this idle chitter chatter. And he just tries to break it down. The Bab basically says, look, this is not the claim that I'm making. Eventually, the Bab descends the pulpit, and the Bab wants to stay for Friday prayers. But the Imam Jama, Sheikh Abu Turab, says, look, maybe it's best if you go. And he says, look, go home, have a chai, have some tea, and just go and relax. Realizing that actually this mob are going to attack the Bab. There are many people who are very angry, who want to actually just jump into anything and just accuse someone of something, even though the Bible is speaking so beautifully. Now, what's very interesting, when we talk about being the intermediary, we're talking again about these 4 gates. Again, we've spoken about this. There's the 12 imams. The first 11 are there. The 12th one goes into hiding. He goes to Jabal Ghan, Jabal Sa. He goes to this mystical cities under the ground, it's understood. You have these 4 gates that are speaking, the intermediaries that are speaking to the 12th imam. This is known as the period of minor occultation. Now, they think that the Bab is claiming to be the 5th gate that's speaking to the Bab, the 5th, the intermediary. They think that he's claiming to be this one, or maybe some sort of representative. And the Bab says, absolutely not, I'm not. Why? Because, of course, the Bab was claiming to be the Ghaim himself, the 12th Imam. And sure enough, he's then let down. But people are furious, people are angry. We're going to pause it there, ladies and gentlemen. It's coming up to 7:30.
What Hazrat Bab, what His Holiness the Bab is doing, is asserting some positive things. I believe in the divinity of God. I believe in the prophetic mission of Islam. I believe, so positive assertions. One negative assertion is that I am not the gate, the 5th gate, dearest Dave, as you kindly articulated. I am not the 5th gate towards the hidden Imam, which would have been also an anathema, a blasphemy, to create another gate. He says, I'm not that. The question is, what are you? Now, nobody in the mosque had the temerity or the circumstance allowed that His Holiness the Bab would expand on what he was. We know that Mullah Sadiq al-Muqaddas had said he's the gate to the Baha'u'llah, but that also was a moot point. Who is the Baha'u'llah? If he's not the 12th Imam, there must be somebody else behind. And the Baha'u'llah, now we know after 160 years, is Baha'u'llah. So the Bab is the gate or the servant towards Baha'u'llah. So at this very early stage, things are what we call a messianic secret. Step by step, it is revealed after the 4th year of his ministry. So it was a very subtle time. I don't know what you and I, Dave, would have done. If we were, God forbid, like the Shish Pari, we would, God forbid, astaghfirullah, we would have jumped to the wrong conclusion. If we were a bit tolerant and nice, we would have said, let's find out more. And again, that is the dilemma of religious inquiry. God forbid that you make a hasty judgment, Dave. You have to wait until it evolves, the plan.
O God, my beloved, my heart's desire.